The League of Women Voters of Linn County conducts these forums as part of its voter education program. The League of Women Voters of Linn County encourages citizen participation in government as a nonpartisan organization. I would also like to start with a shout out happy birthday to the League. Yesterday was the 100th anniversary of the League, founded by Carrie Chapman Katz. We thank our co-sponsors today, Chains Interrupted, the Cear Rapids Civil Rights Commission, Foundation 2, and the Indian Creek Nature Center. Please join me in thanking our sponsors. So I want to thank all of our legislators who are here with us today. There were a few folks who at least let us know that they could not make it. Liz Mathis is at Wartburg for a board meeting. Ashley Hinson let us know she had another event, and we thought that perhaps Representative and Senator Zumwalt would be here, but they're not. So thank you all for your time today. We know that everyone has lots of things to do, and I want to thank all of you in the audience who have joined us today. Your engagement in legislative affairs is important to the process, and we are glad that you're participating. Please note that there are cameras around the room. This forum is being recorded and streamed on behalf of MediaCom, and I'm on by Pro Video and recorded by Neighborhood Network News. Instructions on how to stream or see the forums it's located on the league table. To follow our events, take out your phone and go to Facebook and like the page. I would also note, since there's a large crowd here, and I know some of you are league members, but should you ever want to be league member, and we invite men as well as women to be a part of the league, you can certainly check at the back table for membership. We would love to have you as a part of this organization. In the back of the room, we've got included the 2019 directory for elected officials, and if you want to know about league activities, there is a sign-up sheet. Outside of the room, many of you saw there's League of Women Voter membership information and interest poster, so we'll have information about what were the top vote getters if you did your dots out there. So this morning, the structure will be the legislators will share for 1.5 minutes topics that are important to them this legislative session. And you know, as we step further into the session, it becomes clearer and clearer what is going on, so we'll look forward to hearing from them on those things. After this time, the floor will be open for general questions. I already have a couple of them up here, and they will again have 1.5 minutes to respond. We will end the forum at 11:45. I would note to legislators, and this is partly at their request, if you believe that a question has been adequately answered by another legislator, you are welcome to cede your time to said legislator, especially if that legislator may have some significant knowledge on that topic. So I would also note, I just turned off my cell phone. You know, I've had those horrible moments when it's my phone that's still on after I've asked people to turn them off. So, and if you would hold your applause or reactions until the end of the forum, it will go much more smoothly. And after their closing statements, we will certainly invite your applause. You are encouraged to submit questions for the legislatures. I think you all know the drill on the provided pieces of paper. A lead panel will review the questions for legibility, clarity, and applicability to all legislators. I will read as many questions as time allows, sometimes combining similar questions and striving to cover a variety of topics. We may not get all the questions in, but you are certainly welcome to stay afterwards and speak to the legislators. We hope that you will do that. With that, I will head in, and Representative Bennett, you're right here, so I'm going to have you get us kicked off.
So thank you very much. Can we hear this? Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming, everyone, this morning. I'm State Representative Liz Bennett. I have most of the southeast side of Cedar Rapids, the Mountain View neighborhood, as well as Newbo, Czech Village, and some surrounding areas. I serve on a number of committees in the State House. And whew, I was just talking to somebody a few minutes ago, and if you've been following the news, I think you'll understand when I say that it feels like we have been running around with our hair on fire since the beginning of the session. So there have been a number of things that I've been watching and working on. And so I'll give you a few things that in particular I have been working on, and then maybe some good news, because we could use a little good news, right? Yeah. All right, so we'll start with what I consider to be the bad news. In the House Judiciary Committee, we did attempt to argue against an anti-abortion constitutional amendment. Sadly, our colleagues passed that out. We're still working against it. We have a bill we are concerned about for our LGBTQ populations that would basically give a license to discriminate under the guise of religious freedom. 15 seconds here. Now here's some good stuff. There is some indication that in judiciary we may be able to work on a bill banning the so-called gay panic defense, where if you harm someone or kill someone, you say, oh God, well it's like, I found out that they were gay and I freaked out and that's my excuse for murdering them, so hopefully we can work on banning that. Also in economic growth, I'm going to stop in 1 second. We were supposed to have a bill for a sales tax holiday for guns and ammo. That got pulled from economic growth the day that we were supposed to debate it. Now we know that nothing is ever dead, but we're still working on tamping that down. Thank you.
Good morning, State Senator Todd Taylor here, representing most of the west side, northwest, southwest, and over to Fairfax and part of the Linn County part of Walford. One of the things I thought I would share with you today, kind of preparing this week, is the Senate's debate calendar on Thursday. So here it is, there's just 2 bills on there. So in the morning, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of ratifying the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. And then later in the afternoon, we decided that we were going to have an amendment to change the Constitution to ban abortion. So that was a party line vote. And our leader, Janet Peterson, said, you know, that irony is not lost on us of what you're doing there. You can find that debate on the legislative homepage. And it's not long, you should take a look at it.
Excuse me, Senator Taylor, could you speak up a little bit? Maybe eat the microphone so folks can hear you back.
Add that to my time, would you? The session is kind of in 2 big parts. There's policy and then there's budget. And so we really haven't started much in on the budget. We have had some budget committees. Senator Hogan and I are on the justice system's budget, so we're starting to see that being developed. The governor's proposed her budgets. We'll get targets later, so that probably will be a topic that we'll want to talk about next month. But this last week and this coming week is what's called funnel week, so all these policy bills have to be out of one committee in order to stay alive. And so it was a crazy week with the compressed list. So if somebody has a question on a certain bill, we might want to find out if it's on the list after next week. And there's my stop sign.
Good morning. Can you guys hear that? Yeah, okay. I'm Tracy Eller, State Representative, Iowa House District 70. That's mostly northwest side of Cedar Rapids. I go into Covington and just right into Palo. Something not so exciting this week is we're underfunding schools again. They did not take our amendment to fund the schools at 3%. Something I was excited about for education, though, is through the Education Committee, we did pass new weighting for ELL, English Language Learners, which was exciting. It could get them some more funds. And we kind of broke them out a little bit, so the funding was different. So hopefully that will come to the House for a full floor debate.
Morning, I'm Representative Art State from Northeast Cedar Rapids. And I'll just give you a little rundown on the committees that I'm on. So first of all, natural resources. What we've been dealing with are black bears, fish, eagles, hunting license, bloodhounds, nothing that's controversial, all bipartisan work. In the environmental protection, We haven't been working on anything, so we've been having guests come in to talk about natural resources, DNR and others. I'm disappointed in that since there's so many bills out there dealing with the environment. We're not considering any. And on education, education's been very busy over the last 2 weeks. Particularly, I was on a subcommittee in reference to the don't say gay, I would call it, about gender identity. It would have, or if it passes, it will mean that schools will not be able to discuss anything that has to do with gender identity or transgender. That passed out of committee 2-1 with my vote against it. And we had a voucher bill by Representative Gassman, and that bill would be upended with huge eligibilities for anyone who doesn't go to public schools. Would get $2,000 each and every year to spend on homeschooling or any choice that you wanted to make with it, or just keep it and put it away for later until you're almost 27 years of age in some cases. There was no budget fiscal note on it, or how many people would be involved, or how much it would cost the state, but it would come right out of the general fund. I was a strong no vote on that. And then the last thing we worked on in education on trying to get 3% allowable growth or funding for schools.
Good morning, Rob Hogue, State Senator, representing the people who live in northeast, southeast, and parts of southwest Cedar Rapids. It's an interesting time because we have a lot of subcommittees where we are dealing with could be perceived as relatively minor issues at the same time as that we have some of these high-profile issues. High-profile issues this week: school funding. Senate Republicans are even worse than House Republicans. Senate Republicans are at 2.1%. House Republicans were at 2.5%. Democrats said 3% or higher. But that's not resolved. So people should be weighing in on more is better than less on school funding. And we really do need a long-term plan. Think about the babies being born today who are going to be in the class of 2018. Or 2038, right? We're talking about 2038, and I really think we need a long-term plan on education funding. Other high-profile issues: flood recovery fund. Thanks to the House of Representatives for saying, hey, $20 million wasn't enough. We got an extra $1 million. That actually made a tangible difference yesterday at the Iowa Flood Mitigation Board meeting, which I attended by phone. Governor Reynolds, knowing that there were over $130 million in applications, only proposed $20 million supplemental, and as flood-affected communities know. Of course, hopefully we'll get time to talk about the abortion amendment, and there are a whole bunch of other issues that I'd like to address. Thank you, but we'll do that later.
Hi, I'm Molly Donahue, and I represent the other parts of Southeast Cedar Rapids that they don't represent, as well as Marion, Bertram, and Ely. I am on the Education Committee and the, can you hear me? This is not on, no.
Speak up a little, Molly.
I don't think it's on.
I think it's on. Yeah.
I'm going to have to, can you hear me better now or not? Anyway, so I am I'm on state government, I'm on education, and I'm also on environmental protection, which leaves me a lot of free time, doesn't it, Art? But state government is taking that up. We are looking at, well, my last couple of weeks have really been based on education, and I'm really tied up right now with the discipline bill. If maybe you read something in the paper about it on Tuesday, that's taken up a lot of my time because it needs to have a lot of amendments to make it doable for students and to make sure that students are not being hurt by the rules that are being placed in this bill. So I am working on that a lot. And then also the bill for education went through through the House this last week. It's disappointing that we got, the 2.5, but it's better than the Senate's 2.1. So we're still debating that out at this point. Lots going on, and we've been very busy, but not a lot of those have come to the floor yet in the House.
Good morning. I'm Running-Marquardt, State Representative from the southwest side of Cedar Rapids. Fairfax as well as Walford, parts of Linn County. You know, born and raised here in Cedar Rapids, born in this exact hospital, and looking out at the crowd today, I know about 60% of you, I think, and it does feel like this is a really good community conversation, and I'm always very appreciative about that, for you all taking your time on Saturday mornings, because I know there's 100 different things that we're all invited to. I sincerely appreciate the League of Women Voters as well as the organizations that sponsor this to make it happen once a month. And so with sincere appreciation, I thank you all for being here and for the organization that it takes to put this together. In the first couple weeks of session, especially in campaign years, unfortunately, it becomes a bit of the Wild West of bills out there that are from all sort of perspectives across the state of Iowa. And one perspective I have is the ones that come out that are offensive to the rights of Iowans, that are offensive to our children, all of our children, that those have implications for economic development and workforce development. We need to keep people here in the state of Iowa for our state to prosper. And when we mess around and these bills, some of these bills get these headlines that they don't deserve, it really puts us back as a state. And then we can't attract the businesses, we can't attract the people that we need to make economic development a priority in moving forward. So that's just a different angle that I have with some of these bills. It's really unfortunate they're moving through, but I couldn't be prouder to sit with not only the people at this table, but Senator Mathis as well, who really work hard in the session every day, having the really hard conversations with legislators who come from other perspectives, other parts of the states, and talking to them about what these bills do to our communities back home. And so just, yeah, full of appreciation this morning for everybody. No, I'm kidding. Thank you very much.
Excellent. I would ask our legislators today to be mindful of time because we have lots and lots of questions. I'm going to start with a couple of questions on education. I think that Molly, I'll let you kick this off. And again, I would note that if some people would like to cede their time to a particular legislator on a particular subject, we're more than happy to do that. So there are any number of questions about the funding stream for education, and I think ultimately the question is, how can we as citizens best impact this discussion? It's very clear the issues with the difference between 2.5% and 3%, but what can we do to best assist you to move that discussion?
Well, the discussion is still up there, it's still out there, but the fact of the matter is what you can do if you truly care about public education is you need to make sure that you are contacting people outside of us. Obviously, we all want more for schools, but I don't know if you know this, but in the last 10 years, each child in school received a 32-cent raise. That's what those dollars amount to every single year over the last 10 years in education. And that does not pay for a whole lot. That doesn't even pay for a cup of coffee. So we need more people to be involved in contacting legislators, the governor's office, and letting them know that our schools are having issues, and those behavior issues that I've been dealing with this week because of this other bill, those wouldn't necessarily be where they are today if we had funded our schools fully over the last 10 years. We wouldn't have the need for special buildings to take children that are out of control behaviorally. We would have the funding in the buildings to hire the staffing that we need and to have the programs and the services that all of these students actually need, and maybe we could have prevented some of those issues happening. I don't like being the school to prison pipeline, and this direction is where we're headed because of the lack of funding. We need to put the money into the younger children from preschool and daycare. all the way up to K-12, because if you don't put it there, you're going to put it in the prisons.
Senator Hope, and then.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the committees I serve on now is Administrative Rules Review Committee, and we meet monthly to review administrative rules. One of the administrative rules that were reviewed last Friday was a proposal by the Board of Educational Examiners to significantly reduce the hours required for teachers to have to get licensed in a subject matter, right? So like social studies, reduce it from 52 hours down to 28 hours. That's the change that the Board of Educational Examiners brought to the administrative rules. We tried to put a stop on that, and unfortunately we came up a vote short. We had 5 votes to stop it, only 2 votes against it, but we needed 6 votes under the rules that govern administrative rules. But in discussing that, we asked why are they doing that? Schools, especially in some of the rural areas, are having trouble finding teachers. So their answer was to water down the qualifications. But then we asked, well, why are they having trouble finding teachers? And it's because since the 2017 collective bargaining law, there has been an exodus of teachers from Iowa, both existing teachers and prospective teachers going to other states because Iowa is not as attractive place to teach. So there are a bunch of issues related to education here. We need a renewed public campaign for public education. We have not had as strong of advocacy around public education, I'd say, in about the last decade, and we need that. And I'm out of time, but I'd happy to talk to people individually about that later. Thank you.
Representative Eller.
Thank you. Some of what I wanted to say was already addressed by my colleagues, but Molly made a really important part. We really need to hear from you guys. I am starting to hear a lot more from Iowans around the state from different school districts, not so much here. And the other side still has a lot of misconceptions, especially when I think about when they talk about classroom size. And they're saying the ratios are 13-1. I'm not teaching in classrooms that are 13-1. I'm teaching in classrooms that have 30 plus kids. Now granted, I know I'm only representing Cear Rapids, but I talk to peers across the state that are in classrooms with 30 plus kids. So we just really need to hear personal stories, maybe, you know, your kids, grandkids, what you're seeing in the classrooms, and making sure you're sharing that, especially with education committee members, but even beyond that. Thank you.
Representative State, and then Senator Taylor.
Thank you. You asked what you could do. I think the first thing to be arm yourself with accurate information, because you're getting a lot of spin coming out of the Capitol. So we have a really good resource here in Iowa, a group of researchers called the Iowa Policy Project. You can go online. They will show you about school funding. There's a chart there that shows that over the last 10 years, the funding has been at about 1.8% on average for the last 10 years, and that's below inflation. So you can understand why all of the school districts have had to cut costs, why rural schools have closed, why there are larger class sizes and fewer offerings. It's because of the funding, and that's the first thing we need to do, is make sure that the schools have adequate funding to do all the things that we are asking them to do. So after being armed with this information from this nonpartisan source, please get a hold of anyone on the Education Committee, particularly in the House and Senate, with that information.
Senator Taylor.
Thank you. I'll try to make this brief. On the point that Representative State just made about arming yourself with information, every caucus and the House, Senate, and the governor are all proposing more money for education. So they'll say, well, this is more money for education. What are you complaining about? But I think you should say, well, we want results, right? Is that money going to help us get better test scores for reading in 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade? Is it going to help us with ACT scores, college entrance exams, or apprenticeship programs? Are we delivering what we need to deliver? Class size, you know, under Tom Vilsack, which seems like 100 years ago, he fought for lower class size, and it was costly, but we added to it, and we did see some results in reading test scores in 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade, and then maybe there's some other metrics out there, but. So, yeah, it's more money. I remember there was a Republican senator sitting here last year saying we did give more money to education. You Democrats just aren't, happy with it. Well, what I want is results, so.
Okay, and we're going to keep on the subject of education. I'm going to ask Representative Stade to start on this question. There are several questions, particularly related to Senate Study File 3077, and that is really about private diploma granting institutions being eligible to provide a workforce diploma, but also several questions on what you brought up, which is the voucher bill. That essentially will allow folks to get reimbursed for their private school, religious school, or homeschooling. Could you speak to that in terms of the likelihood of passage?
Well, yes. I was on the subcommittee for the voucher bill. Of course, I was voted down 2-1. It moved on to the Education Committee. And I'm sure that they are aware that we'll lock up in the Education Committee, at least the Democratic caucus will, so they won't have any of our votes. And I do believe that on that Education Committee there are several rural Republicans who also will not vote for the voucher bill, because the voucher bill doesn't help the rural areas whatsoever. People don't have a choice to go to a private or parochial school in the rural areas. So they understand as well as I do and as well as you do that if you take that money out of the general fund and spend it somewhere else, that's less for education in general. So I am in support of public schools and public money spent for public schools, and I think we'll stop that voucher bill in the Education Committee this next week.
Anyone else like to speak to it? Not necessary, but.
I'll add.
Okay, Representative Marquardt.
So there's the voucher bill. There's also a bill dealing with Future Ready Iowa. And in that bill, it's talking about a for-profit company and HiSETs or GEDs, high school diplomas as we know it. And so we're working, there's myself and Representative Winkler are working with Workforce Development, who's going to be the rule makers in that piece of legislation, and then also the Department of Education, to see what we can do to make changes to that piece of legislation. But just kind of stepping back and looking at the entire education system, it has been starved for so many years at 0% or maybe 1% growth. That, when they're saying 2%, everybody's like, wow, that's great, 2%. But we have to deal with what we've done to our schools for so many years now that the Republicans have made it a priority to starve our public schools. And so moving forward, we all know, and I talked to a teacher 2 weeks ago, kindergarten teacher, 28 kids in her classroom, 6 of them are special needs. So we know that larger class sizes equal tougher times for our children. We know that. We understand that. And so when we continually starve our schools the way we have been doing, we're going to get tougher results for our kids. And our kids deserve a fair shake. They deserve a fair chance at education. And time's up again. Thank you.
Just real quick. Public school used to be the #1 priority in Iowa. It isn't anymore. The difference between $90 million that they're offering and the $120 million that we asked for is huge. And it's still not enough to get the schools out from under the depths that they've fallen. They actually asked for 3.75 just to stay above water this year, not to take care of anything that they've lost in the past. And so we have to get schools to be the #1 priority so that we can get good work or businesses to come here. If we don't have a good workforce, why come here?
Okay, next we're going to move on to a perennial favorite in mental health, and you guys will have to carry the water for Senator Mathis since she's not here this morning. But clearly, we have a vision for comprehensive mental health services for both adults and children in the Iowa Code. But with the federal government moving to block granting many aspects within HHS, including mental health, What, do you want to give us an idea of whether or not we're going to be able to secure sustainable mental health funding and attract the psychiatric care that is needed in this state?
I will start with a part of that question, which is where we are on mental health in the 2020 legislative session. The biggest proposal that's out there is Governor Reynolds' tax proposal, a significant part of which would be to replace local property tax dollars for mental health with state sales tax dollars. She's proposing a sales tax increase of $0.01, and she wants to use some of that money for mental health. Sounds good, except the fact is what she wants to do is replace local property tax dollars with the state sales tax dollars. So it's not really an increase in funding for mental health, more so than it's a tax shift. And there are two problems with the tax shift. First of all, sales taxes are more regressive than property tax. So
You can have my time on this.
well, I got 30 seconds. I'll be done, Kirsten. Thank you, though.
You're welcome.
So that's a problem. The regressive nature of it is. But number two is, how many of you trust the Iowa legislature in the future to keep using the sales tax dollars for mental health? When we know that local governments will, use their mental health levy for mental health services. So that's one part of that question, and others can try to address the others. Thank you.
Representative State.
Excuse me. I've tried to look at that bill closely and the other ones that are associated with it, and like Senator Hogue, I would call it a shuffle, a swap, and a shift. If you look closely at the things that are happening, it'll be pulling, in her bill, it'll be pulling funds from other sources of the general fund, and it would be swapping one tax for another, a sales tax for an income tax reduction. And when you finished with it all, I can't see any net gain in revenues. So I don't understand how they're raising money for natural resources and the trust fund when they're taking the money from what we're already appropriating and moving that into this bill. So it's just all kinds of shifts. So I hope everybody will take a close look at that and see exactly what's happening in all of the moving parts. So it appears that there's no net gain whatsoever, and it ends up with an income tax reduction.
Senator Taylor.
Thank you. Another way to describe what we just heard is the regressive tax, sales tax, it's a tax on poor people. Okay, so I will vote no on raising taxes on poor people. There will be some shifting in there. So it'll be spun, so you gotta be careful on the spin. And I will tell you, and we are partisan, but the people who are running the place up there, the House, the Senate, and the Governor, are all Republicans, and if they actually cared deep in their heart about mental health, they wouldn't have closed 2 institutions in the last several years. And the institutions are one method to deliver services. There are community-based corrections, or community-based systems to deliver mental health, and Medicaid paying for that. So we haven't seen it in their budget numbers, we haven't seen it in their actions recently, we haven't seen it in any other method at all. And there was a little $333,000 that we added to Glenwood recently, but there's some scandals going on out there. You read the papers about those. So that was nothing for really towards helping it. So they're speaking loudly with their budgets and with their past actions on mental health. So we need to change direction.
Representative Donovan.
Just real quick, and they've all talked about the regressive tax. The fact of the matter is that it's also very unsteady. Just like if you wanted a grant in school, you don't have the exact same amount of money coming in every year, so how do you pay for the services that you're trying to provide? But also with Senator Taylor, not only would, if they cared about mental health, would they not close the places that they've closed, the ones that are open, they would have oversight, making sure those scandals weren't happening, making sure they're staffed properly, making sure that they have people with the right certifications working there.
Okay, I think we're going to switch over to Medicaid quickly, looking at the work requirements related to Medicaid eligibility, your thoughts on whether or not that is likely to pass, and I'll let you guys decide who wants to field that first. Senator Taylor.
Thank you. Just Thursday, in the Labor Committee, the chair, Jason Schultz of Schleswig, proposed a bill, and it passed on party lines, to say that, you know, the financial services, Equifax or TransUnion, that we can use those kinds of services to double check, make sure nobody's getting double benefits. And he didn't look at how costly it was, but it's going to mandate that the state, you know, check these clearinghouses, you know, in order to get benefits. And what the fine print says is if we find that somebody's, you know, really not eligible, we're going to take away their SNAP benefits, food stamps, for the whole family, not just that one individual. So they're weaponizing food for the whole family, and it's mean-spirited. He did something similar last year, and the House did not advance it. But what happens in the Iowa Senate is if you have if you're Republican in charge and you have a little pet project, you'll get a bill through a committee and maybe even on the floor, and they don't really think it through. They just do that. And I can give you a list of them. But that's one of them that Senator Schultz did, and it's mean-spirited.
Something else I want to say about this is that when you're having these conversations with other people, because I find that this is a conversation that comes up, whether we're talking about disability assistance, whether we're talking about food assistance, there's this specter that in my lifetime I think has come, you know, all the way back from the 80s with Ronald Reagan, and you know, this idea that there are these people who just don't deserve what they're getting. They are gaming the system. And I think Ronald Reagan called it, you know, a welfare queen or something like that. I really urge you, when you're having conversations with your friends and neighbors, don't accept that specter. Don't start from the framing of, you know, oh, well, gosh, you know, maybe we should do this or this. It has been shown in studies about these systems that this idea that people are just ripping off the system and taking advantage of it, by and large, is not true, okay? So the fact that we have all of these bills that actually probably end up taking more time, more employee hours, more expense to try to just find out if there might be one person, you know, who isn't a difficult situation in their life and just might be getting more than they should get. Do not start from that place. Start from a place of compassion when you're having these conversations with people and rebut that idea.
Senator Taylor, I saw your hand, and then we'll go to Senator Hogan.
This isn't necessarily in regards to the bill, but I wanted to speak to, like Representative Bennett was talking about, the low percentage of fraud, because we just had DHS come speak to us about the 3 different methods that they use to make sure that there is not fraud and people aren't claiming benefits in multiple states and aren't scamming the system. There is a very comprehensive process with a lot of money spent on it. And we got back, for SNAP specifically, the percentage of fraud is 2.19. So it's very, very low. Child care assistance fraud is 0.18 by provider. By recipient is 0.61, and FIP, the percentage is 4.34. There's very, very low fraud.
Senator Hogan.
I'm just going to add at this point, we have a new director of the Department of Human Services, Kelly Garcia, and I will tell you, as somebody who has watched Chuck Palmer and Jerry Foxhoven over the last 9 years, I actually think Director Garcia strikes me as a breath of fresh air. She's very engaged. I actually think it looks like, fingers crossed, but it looks like this will turn out to be a really good appointment. She is very engaged with DHS staff. She has visited in 7 months the institutions more than Director Palmer and Director Foxhoven had in 9 years. So she's traveling a lot. She's 40 years old. She's from Texas. She has a lot of really good background. She's got 2 small kids under the age of 5, and she's a dynamo. So I'm hopeful that some of the problems we've had will get fixed. I'm also hopeful that it sounds like she's going to be more engaged on pushing the MCOs to pay, because remember, a lot of our nonprofit providers right here in Linn County are still significant amounts of money, in some cases even millions of dollars behind being paid, which has really hurt their ability to do the work to fulfill their missions. Thank you.
Representative Ellert brought up one piece, and then Senator Hogue brought up the other. The only thing I would like to add on that is that the House Committee in Labor, we see what's going on in the Senate Labor Committee, and we are ready and willing to have those conversations not only with legislators across the aisle in committee, but then fully debate this if it comes to the floor. You are adding layers of bureaucracy when there already are checks and balances here. We care about every single tax dollar that comes in. So we don't want things to, go to fraud. So that's why we have things in checks and balances in place. And if you want to bring in a couple extra companies so they can get some extra money, where's that money going to come from? Benefits for Iowans, that's where it's going to come from. So we're watching that. We're going to check that. The other thing that I do feel it is very harmful when folks are out there and they are using verbiage that attack people on food stamps, especially. The conversation we sometimes have to switch to is not only are those Iowans, but they have families, they have children. We already have in Iowa, let alone Linn County, 1 in 5 children who go hungry at night or are undernourished. Thank you.
Great. Now we're going to move on, and there are a number of questions that seem to be combined. I'm going to pull them apart because I actually think they are both deserving of a particular focus. I'm going to start with the issues related to LGBTQ and gender issues. So what are some of the things that that you can do to help safeguard this as it moves forward? And secondarily, could you highlight perhaps some of the other legislators around the state that we might contact? And Representative Bennett, I'll ask you to start on this.
Okay, thank you. And so let me just restate to make sure that I'm answering the question that people have. I think the question is primarily about who should we be contacting and what should we be doing.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much. So here's something that is really good to do, okay? So first start with your own legislator. Then if you're receiving action alerts from organizations, they will usually tell you where a bill is, so what committee it's in. So I think once you've contacted your own legislator, you can move to emailing and calling the members of the committee where a bill is moving, okay? Because they're going to be the next people in line who are making a decision about that. So I think that would be my best advice on that.
And could you perhaps note who the other people on the committee, at least in the House, that are likely to take this up?
Well, so it depends, okay? Because we have a number of bad bills that have been in play, okay?
13.
And so, 13. And so those bills they can go to.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love my time too.
Okay, they can go to judiciary, they can go to education, they can go to human resources, they can go all different places. So that's why typically if you get an action alert or if you go to the website, let's say you look at the bill, over on the left-hand side of the website, you can see what committee it's in, okay? You can also, on the State House website, there's a tab right up at the top for committees. You can click on that, click on the committee, and you'll see a full list of the members of that committee, okay? Do you think, does that answer the question?
Yeah, and you might add if there are any things beyond that, and perhaps illuminate the language that you had shared at the very beginning regarding how do you make statements that are perhaps convincing about the importance of this issue.
Right. So I think that the most important thing, and I think we've seen this from research as well, is to tell personal stories, okay? Do you have a person in your family? Do you have a coworker? Do you have a person in your life? Maybe with your business, with your hiring, you know, would something in your life be affected by these types of bills, okay? So for example, you know, I'm a member of the LGBTQ community, so I can talk about how something impacts me. To Representative Running-Marquardt's point, I can also talk about, you know, when my company is interviewing people and trying to attract people to the state, what would happen if they came to visit with their spouse and we went to a restaurant for a lunch, and then somebody from the restaurant came out and said, actually, we're gonna have to ask you to leave. Especially in the age of social media, not only the impact on that person and that team of workers, but our state, okay? You know, things like this. I received a call, I think 2 weeks ago now, from a mom who moved to the state because her daughter had been discriminated against in Wisconsin because they don't have some of the protections that we have. And so with some of the bills that are coming forward now, she was almost in tears saying, oh my God, we're gonna have to move somewhere else now. Where can we go? So I think what we found is the most persuasive thing is tell those personal stories that you know of or that you've heard of. So.
Senator Hogue.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So thank you, Representative Bennett, for that. I actually was on the subcommittee for one of the many attacks on the LGBTQ community this week, and it was in the, drum roll, local government committee. So they have a proposal that would allow more religious exemptions to Iowa's civil rights laws and other laws. And it's, the primary example used is the people who do baking and don't want to bake for a wedding between a man and man or a woman and woman. They don't want to do that. Well, the opposition was, it came out of committee on a 2-to-1 vote, but what do you do when you're dealing with Dennis Guth and Julian Garrett? I mean, it's going to come out 2-to-1. But the business community in Iowa is doing a great job opposing it. And at that subcommittee meeting, we heard from the Iowa Chamber Alliance, the Iowa Technology Association, Wellmark, Meredith, Principal Financial, and a small business owner from Pocahontas County, among others. Pocahontas County, by the way, a county that has lost half its population and is down to about 8,000 people. And they said, if you do this, we won't be able to bring people to Iowa. So it was really strong testimony. I'm hopeful that this bill will be stopped in local government next week. It's Senate File 508, so stay tuned.
Excellent. Representatives.
Yeah, thank you. As I mentioned earlier, I had one of these bills in the Education Committee, and I would offer this, that there are about 12 individuals in the Iowa House, 12 legislators, who have very strong conservative religious beliefs, and they believe that any type of gender identity that's different than their chosen ones is wrong and sinful and so on. And I've heard that in the debates in these meetings. So to help educate them, you can find their names on the bills. If you look it up on the Iowa legislative site, you pull up that particular bill, it'll show who the sponsor and co-sponsors are on that particular bill. And I think it would behoove everyone to let them know your feelings, and that just because they talk about gender identity does not mean that their children will become something different. They really do have I would say, a sincere fear of others, individuals that are not like themselves. And how we get past that, I'm not sure. The second thing is to make sure next November that they are in the minority.
Representative Donahue?
Well, you just took the end of my line here. First off, as a teacher and one who returns on Fridays to work with high school kids, this was a huge topic yesterday in government class. And there were a couple of students there that are of the LGBTQ community, and they're just so disheartened on how anybody could look at them and say, we just want to erase them from society. We don't want to hear the words. We don't want to hear. It's terrible to look into a child's eye, because they're children. Even if they're 18, they're children. And try to explain to them what their viewpoints are, and you have to be non-biased, what their viewpoints are and what's happening in society today. And so please contact the people on those bills and let them know how you feel, because it is important, and it's very important to the kids in particular.
I'm going to have Representative Marquardt, and then we're going to give a quick moment to Senator Hope.
I stated in the beginning of our opening lines about sort of the Wild West bills and how Iowa is then perceived nationally. Again, especially with these type of bills, number one, these are human beings we're talking about. These are Iowans. These are our neighbors. These are our friends. These are our family. But then also, our actions in Des Moines, they have consequences. And when people sign on to bills, or when they craft these bills that go against people's rights, the motto of our state, our rights we will maintain, it means something to all of us. And so when it goes against all of that, and then we go out and we're made fun of and nationally because of some of these things these people are bringing up, again, it really hurts us with our workforce. We are losing Iowans, and we want these great jobs to come to our state as well, but we don't have the workforce to fill them. Well, we're not making it a welcoming state for not only the Iowans who are here and the ones we want to attract if we continue with this sort of thing. So please contact your legislator, contact other legislators in your area, and then also you can see when you're looking up the bills, like the others had said, the people who have crafted these bills, they put their name on these bills. Contact them, and then you can also follow what committees they're on, subcommittees or large committees, and you can add on, find those people as well, and you just click on the committee, you click on it, who's in the committee, their names pop up and their emails and phone numbers pop up. So thank you.
Senator Hope, a quick.
Yeah, just really quick. This is not just an idle threat. Last April, they amended the Civil Rights Act and prohibited the use of Medicaid dollars for gender reassignment surgery. So, and the Republican majority all voted for that. So it's not just an idle threat. This stuff is real. I keep hoping it's idle, but they did that, right? They did that. So I think you need to take this stuff seriously.
Okay, and now we'll move on to another hot button topic, and that would be a woman's right to choose. And I'm wondering, again, I think you've given us a lot of tools for what we can do, but are there other things you can recommend and perhaps give us some perspective on this issue moving forward this session? And I'll let whoever would like to take a stab at this first jump right out. Representative Bennett?
Thank you. So we've already talked about, the things that you can do, who you can contact, et cetera. I think it is also really important to maybe have some of those difficult conversations with people in your circles, okay? So maybe people who aren't as active as you are, so talking to them about people that you know, things that you may have experienced, and reminding them of the importance of the rights that we have as women right now, and encouraging them to act, telling them what they can do to act as well. I think sometimes it can almost seem like we're in the twilight zone because it's 2020. It's 2020, And my grandma's generation is still fighting for this stuff, right? And it can seem like, well, I don't think they'll, I don't think they'll really do it, but it truly is urgent. So please move the people that you know to act, invite them to things with you, share email addresses of who they can contact with them, etc.
Great. Representative Donahue?
And remember that they aren't just taking a woman's right away. I mean, this is still going to be available. It's just not going to be safe, and it's not going to be legal. There are situations that require someone to have an abortion because of life-threatening events, and this is going to prevent that. So please make sure you're contacting people on those committees and letting them know that how you feel.
Senator Hogue?
Well, just procedurally, and Senator Taylor mentioned in his opening comments, but this, the Senate Joint Resolution 2001 is out of the Senate. So now it's in the House. Now the House, much closer issue. First of all, it's 53-47, so the majority is not as big in the House. Second, there have been a number of House Republicans who have indicated, who have shown in the past that they don't just vote for everything. So if you're going to advocate, that's where you want to focus your efforts on Senate Joint Resolution 2001. It passed party line 32-18. What day was that? Thursday afternoon. I would also just point out, I thought our Democratic leader, and Todd referenced this, did a really nice job pointing out the severe maternal health crisis we have in Iowa right now with us. We're sitting here in Cear Rapids, we've got 2 great hospitals, a lot of medical providers, but there are places in the state where there is not access to maternal health, and so far nothing being done from the majority party on that while they do these sorts of issues instead.
Representative State.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that what Senator Hogue is talking about, that resolution is in the Iowa House. I think it's already out of committee, so it'll be going on the floor for a vote. And the numbers are close. So there are 2, Louis Zumbaugh and Ashley Henson's vote would make a difference. So Linn County, I mean, it's very close. That might make the difference in whether that passes or not.
Excellent. We're
Can
going
I
to
say
take a
something,
small
Linda, real
break.
quick?
I know it's warm in here, so.
Linda, can I say something real quick on that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, yes.
Another thing that I just would like folks to please, not only on this issue, but a couple other issues, is watch what legislators do. Not just what they say up here, or not just what they might write in a column in the newspaper. When they vote, and they vote, their votes have consequences that close down places that provide maternal support, that provide health care to women and men. And yeah, so please go back, talk to your legislator, talk to all the legislators in this area if this is a topic that's important to you. But then also come back and do a check too. If people are saying one thing to your face, if they're saying one thing at the League of Women Voters Forum, or they're saying one thing to the paper, but they go to Des Moines and they vote against Iowans and their wishes and against their rights, you please help keep them accountable too, not only in November, but when they do it. Thank you.
Excellent. Representative.
Got me all fired up.
And to add on to Representative Running-Marquardt's comment, we have a really nice feature that's been added to the legislator website this year that makes it really easy for you to look up and see how we vote. So you can check that out.
Hold them accountable, is what she's saying. So, as a quick brief aside, I'm going to let everybody know what the results were from the polling that we had up on the walls. So the top 4 issues, and I think legislators would be very interested in knowing this. The top one was Iowa should protect the rights of LGBTQ individuals, with 49 agreeing and 5 disagreeing. Number 2 was Iowa's lifetime voting ban for people with felonies should end, with 48 agreeing and 1 disagreeing. Iowa should pass an abortion ban resolution with 2 agreeing and 43 disagreeing. And in 4th place, K-12 school funding should be increased by at least 2.5%, with 42 agreeing and no one disagreeing. So that gives you at least an idea of how the constituents who have been with us today are feeling about these issues. So we have a couple of questions on climate change and environment. Not a surprise here, I will start with Senator Hogue. There are 2 parts to these questions. One, I think, is people are interested, and I would ask everybody to say yes or no on this part, and that is, would you support a moratorium on the expansion of or creation of new factory farms in the state? So let's start with that first, and just tell me yes or no. And Representative Bennett, we'll just start with you, and we'll go down the line.
Yes.
Never that easy. No.
Yes.
Yes, and I have 4 bills that would do that.
It is actually more complicated, but yes.
I would say yes.
Is this on?
It is. Yeah.
Okay. Like others said, I'm going to say yes. Like others have said, though, it's never just that easy, and you have to see what the bill is in front of you, because there's never, it's not an excuse. I'm going for it, but we really need to see kind of what the language says first before we kind of give a yes, no right now, but.
Right, and I think that I asked
it's.
for yes, no, only because
Of time, I get that, and I'm taking more time talking about it, but.
Who's in control of the legislature, I think the likelihood is about nil. So on the environment, and this I think could bear a deeper discussion, Senator Hogue. So the editorial in today's Gazette suggests using sales tax to increase and fund climate mitigation. What should be the foremost funding for conservation funding, and whether or not you can amend the governor's proposal so a larger percentage of the 1 cent sales tax would go towards protecting water quality.
Sure. Okay. So first of all, let me just say climate change is kind of an issue like poverty. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And then there are hundreds of ways that you respond to climate change, just like there are hundreds of ways we should be responding to poverty. The specific issues that are kind of up for consideration. One is the formula on the Natural Resources and Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund, which Governor Reynolds has proposed raising the sales tax to fund. And by the way, that is something I've always supported unequivocally, the 3/8 cents for natural resources. There are 3 problems with what she's proposing. Number one is she is changing the formula significantly. And to me, that violates the trust and the commitment that we made to Iowa voters before Iowa voters voted in 2010. Second, there's a significant bait and switch element of what she's doing. She is proposing raising the sales tax for the Natural Resources Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund, but then cutting general fund dollars for natural resources, and my staff says that number is over $45 million cut to natural resources. So it's a bait and switch, and that's not what voters voted for. Voters voted to add money for natural resources, not take away existing funds. And then the third big problem is she's tied it to this reckless income tax cut primarily for the wealthiest. And so that's a problem. Yes, should we be investing in natural resources as a way to sequester carbon dioxide, to manage extreme weather events? Absolutely, we should do that. We should be doing more of that. That's why I don't really favor changing the formula. It's also why I don't favor the bait and switch of what she is proposing.
Thank you, Representative State.
Excuse me, thank you. And In addition to that particular bill and what's going on with that, we have a standing committee in the House and a standing committee in the Senate. That standing committee is called Environmental Protection. And there are more than 50 bills there that could be considered. They're about CAFOs, water quality, nutrient production, microstations in the water, bottle bills, plastic bills, all kinds of things that would address problems with our environment, including even flooding bills, what we could do. But none of those are being considered because our meetings are being canceled and none of those bills are being brought forward. So it's as if the protection of the environment is just something we're not going to be talking about, not going to be discussing, and not moving bills. So I'm really concerned about the bottle bill. There's a bottle bill in our local government committee that would scrap it and send it to the landfill.
Representative Donahue said I could have a little of her time. So let me just add a couple other quick things. First of all, there is some hope that the legislature might actually do something positive in terms of soil health. Soil health is important because the healthier the soils are, the more water that gets retained in extreme weather events. Second, we really should be doing more for renewable energy, and unfortunately, the bipartisan consensus around that has fallen apart, and now there are proposals out there to try to limit, for example, wind power siting, and there was an attack last year on solar power, which I think has gone away, but you never know for sure. And then third, we're back to the flood recovery issue too, and I just want to mention that. Okay, so they've done the 21 million, thanks to Charlie McConkey, a Democrat from Council Bluffs, who stood up and said, hey, 20 million doesn't even cover the immediate needs that have been identified. So we did 21 million, but there is this remaining $144 million in applications, plus all the hazard mitigation that communities across our state want to do. Hazard mitigation should be as central to what government does as police and fire protection. And we need to, especially because of climate change, we need to get that integrated into what we do on a regular basis. Thank you. Thank you. No.
Who was waiting?
No, it's okay.
Are we doing it?
Forget it.
Great. We're going to ask a question now, and I'll let whoever would like to take this on. Several questions regarding occupational licensing and the challenges or the need for reform in those licensing laws to assure that people have access to this and a better chance to go to work. Senator Taylor.
This is a tricky one, okay, because there's some groups up at the Capitol right now that are pushing, hey, let's reduce barriers for people to get jobs. Sounds great, we're all for that. But we got to dig a little deeper below the surface, because reducing those regulations, let's say for educators. If you're in Florida, you have a bachelor's degree, you can teach K-12. And if we say, well, let's remove the the barriers and let's add reciprocity. So if you're licensed in another state, you can come to Iowa. It'll help us with our teacher shortage. Well, in Iowa we have bachelor's degree, we got student teaching, we got a teacher certificate. There's methods that we use to see if you're effective teaching K-12. We might have some actual top quality physicists who work at Rockwell here in town. Maybe they could really deliver good information to teachers or kids, but they don't know how to teach. So we got to teach people how to teach. And so that's an example. Another one I've used, I've said this like 5 times this week, because I'm on the state government committee. A lot of these bills are coming through there. Elevators. Elevators, you got to be an electrician and know hydraulics, not just wires and power. So it's a specialty. So we put barriers around those positions for the elevator mechanics are very specific. So you can't just say, oh, anybody who knows how to wire a movable box of people. It's public safety. So then there's some things that we could do, but we got to be really, really careful about how we do it. Removing those regulations, it sounds like a good idea in practice, but we got to peel back the layers.
This is a hot topic, I can tell. Representative Taylor, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Representative Marquardt.
Mine's quick, and it kind of just piggybacks off of Senator Taylor. It is a big safety issue. Of course, we want to, eliminate some of the barriers so people can come work, but it's a huge safety issue, and some of the people making the decisions do not understand that. As I had a conversation the other day about safety and childcare, because we've had 8 children die, and they compared it to cosmetology. Now, both are very worthwhile careers, but you can't compare safety in cosmetology to safety of caring for children.
Representative Bennett, and then Representative.
I'm not sure this works at all, so I'm going to feel this for a minute. I am all for lowering the cost of licensure because it's difficult for some people to pay for that, especially after they've just gotten out of college and they have bills to pay for that. So lower the price of the licenses, that's awesome. Reducing license requirements, a huge problem for me, particularly in education, because we have seen some of those. I don't want to see an administrator working in our schools that has never taught or doesn't even have an education background, which is something that can and has happened. We need, as he said, as Senator Taylor said, to make sure that our teachers are highly qualified in what they're doing. And we're already lowering the licensure requirements in social studies, which is a very unfortunate thing for our state because we already don't teach it well enough as it is. They've cut it back, it's not a priority. So when you lower the licensure requirements, then you really are saying it's definitely not a priority. Might tell us why we have some social ills in our country because we don't teach that. So ultimately, yes, I'd like to lower the amount of money for licensure, but I don't want to reduce the requirements necessary. We need to raise our standards. We used to be 1, 2, and 3 in the nation in education, and now we're, fighting with the exact same states, by the way, Wisconsin and Minnesota for 13, 14, 15, 16. I don't want to be there anymore as an educator. I want us back in number 1, 2, and 3, and the only way to do that is to fully fund the schools and to make sure that we have high standards of our educators.
So the way this is being framed is that there's a gentleman who wants to have a barber shop, a mobile barber shop. And so currently we don't allow for that in Iowa code. And so I think it's fair and reasonable to make changes that we can allow people to do the job they want to do, but we still need to follow around the same sort of qualifications and parameters so we don't cheapen the quality of not only that profession, but a lot of other professions. So what they're trying to do is make this guy kind of the poster child for horrible regulations that we have out there in the state of Iowa, and then they're trying to put under the radar get rid of all these other regulations and qualifications in with that legislation. And we don't want that. I mean, there's some things that are fair and reasonable. Like cosmetologists, they have to have so many hours every year, and it's just outrageous, in my humble opinion. But we don't want to cheapen that profession, but there's a balance in there. There's a lot of our healthcare professions, though, in the state of Iowa that we have, and we want to make sure that our healthcare industry, those professionals are getting the professional development that they need. And we do want quality professional development for our educators, for people who are doing so we just have to find a fair and balanced way to approach this. I think we can find that answer. A lot of us are working with across the aisle, having those hard conversations with legislators from all over the state. Thank you.
Representative Bennett.
Thank you. I would second what Representative Running-Marquardt said. There is one bill in particular that's kind of in these cluster of bills that I'm following because folks from the deaf community and the translator community have been reaching out to me about them. Senate Study Bill 3088 would eliminate the Board of Sign Language Interpreters, et cetera, and licensing requirements for sign language interpreters. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever played telephone game? Do you want to play telephone between you and your doctor when you're making a medical decision? Do you want to play telephone between you and your lawyer if you seek legal representation? Probably not, and on and on. So some of the things that are being called a barrier to having a job really are just making sure that that you can do that job in a way with the knowledge that is necessary to provide what is needed to that individual and to that consumer. So I'd also ask you to consider that there is a consumer protection element to this, and in this particular case, a civil rights element as well. Because if you are not able to communicate, if what is being translated to you is not a faithful translation of what is occurring, you are not able to participate in society in the same way as everybody else. So please consider that when you think about some of these bills.
Okay. Next, we have a discussion, and I think this is at least initially focused to our House members. And this is regarding affordable and fair housing. What do you see as the current rhetoric on the state level regarding House Study Bill 690 and your stance on this? The bill states that county or city, quote, shall not adopt or enforce any regulation that prohibits housing providers from denying housing based on sources of income, including those with federal housing vouchers. Representative State.
It's interesting, I just was assigned to the subcommittee on that bill and have been starting to do some research on that, talking to some attorneys. So what this would do would prevent local governments from passing any ordinance that restricts a landlord's ability to not rent to someone because of the source of their income. And so what we believe that that is addressed is that they don't want poor people in their housing. So it's a kind of a mean-spirited thing in order to do that, and it's a preemptive sort of thing as well, because there is no, as far as I know, as far as we've found so far, there is no jurisdiction or local jurisdiction in our counties or cities who have done that. There aren't any ordinances. And we're also not sure that's even constitutional for local government to do that because it's not a protected class. The poor are not a protected class. So I'm looking into that, see where we go with that. The bill is unnecessary. I'm at this point a no vote on it. I'm trying to understand where it's coming from, who's bringing it forward, but I have not been able to discover that yet, just being assigned it on Thursday afternoon.
Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Representative State. As Representative State has stated, there are a lot of different considerations. I have received some contacts about this one as well. One thing that is on my radar with this bill is that it does appear that there have been some disabled veterans who have been negatively impacted by discrimination based on the source of their income, their veterans' disability income. So I'm trying to find out more about this as well. And I guess we would have to see what a final bill would look like before I could say what I would vote on it. But I'm concerned.
Representative Dunn.
Ultimately, this just adds to the fact that we are already very low on affordable housing. And one of those veterans that's concerned about this actually lives in my district. It very much can discriminate against them. So we need to make sure that we're putting forth bills that help those who are vulnerable in our communities rather than hurting our vulnerable people in our communities.
Great. We have a couple of questions, having just survived the caucuses and elections. I'm looking at Valerie Smith. Thank you. So the first of these is noted here to be directed at Representative State, but then the rest of you can answer the second part of this. So for those of you who were at your caucuses and you saw petitions for people to get on the ballot, something new is now at the top of those petitions, requiring you to have an individual state that they are responsible for those petitions. The questioner asked whether or not it is possible to change the language on the circulator information for nomination petitions so that section will appear below the voter signatures rather than at the top of the page. So Representative Spade, I'll give that to you, and then I'll ask the second part of this question.
Well, I hadn't looked into this, so I would say it's probably an issue with the Secretary of State. I don't know that there's any legislation or any law that requires them to put it at the top of the form, on the form, just so that they'll notify the person who's signing it, who is actually circulating the petition for someone to be nominated. So it's kind of interesting that they would make another obstacle to doing that, because we want to get people, whatever party they are, involved in their democracy, and if people support them or having them run, I think that would be that's a great thing to continue to do. And so I don't understand why they would do that, except making the transparency. So if you're getting that circulated with individuals, who is it that wants that person on the ballot? That's okay to know. I mean, that's great. But where it is on that form, it doesn't make any difference to me. I know when I circulated at my caucus, I filled out what they're talking about is filling out your name, address, and who you are at the top of the form. And I'm okay with that. I filled out all of those in my forum. Hopefully, the individuals that circulated my petitions in the other caucuses did as well. But that's the new rule from the Secretary of State.
Representative Marquardt.
Are we doing closing comments?
Yes.
So I'd like to start off closing comments with.
Not just yet. I get that it's warm. And
I
you're ready
know,
to go.
we've got two senators on the panel and we've only got 5 minutes, so I was just trying to gauge my.
11:45.
Okay, 11:45, great.
20 minutes.
So the next part of the question is, would you support, and perhaps you can give us some perspective on what would be needed to change from a caucus to a primary?
You know, driving in today, my favorite show, NPR, Wait, Don't Tell Me, was on, and unfortunately, Iowa was one of the jokes on there, and it's disturbing because in my caucus, we had a great time. It was community, it was, my neighbors, it's friends, a couple relatives were in there too. We had discussions, and they were, what a caucus is supposed to be. And I have been going to my caucus since I was a young child. I hope that this experience, my kid went, he's 13. I hope this experience is available for generations to come. I know the math gets a little fuzzy. I know the app didn't work this time. I also get some people were jamming up our phone lines. Poo-poo on them for doing that and ruining the good thing that we have here in the state of Iowa. And we did a good job. We focus on questioning the presidential candidates, and we're not easy on them either. We don't care if you're a superstar, if you've got $1 million, or what committee you're serving on in the U.S. Senate. We don't care. We'll ask you any question, we'll let you know where we're at on things. And that's retail politics at its finest. I mean, we're so lucky. I hope that we continue to have the caucus experience moving forward. I get there's problems with it. If we move to a primary, we probably won't be first again. And we won't have the kind of experiences that we've had in the past. So that's just my opinion. I'd also like to give, I'm going to make this my closing comments too, a shout out to my two Valentines who are here in the audience today, Coy and Jack, and then also really appreciate you all coming out this weekend and spending time with us and having this, not only this conversation, but intimate conversations after this on policy. Thank you.
As far as the caucus goes, I want to make a huge shout out to everybody who ran them, who volunteered in them, who worked at them. These are, I know some people think it's antiquated, but it is a community meeting, and it is when you get together with people in your area and discuss what's going on and what's important.
A quick intervention here. How many people in the room attended their caucuses?
Wow.
Anyway, so I want to make sure that people know that they're making fun of us out there, yes, but most of the districts or precincts did very well and had great people working in them and did what they're supposed to do. I know that we need to make sure that more people can participate. I think we have 4 years to make this right, and we need to.
Okay.
Do you want us all to go, Linda?
I'm going to ask one last question, and if anyone has any brilliant insight, you can add it. But again, in the yes or no perspective, do you believe that Iowa state and local agencies are ready to address cybersecurity and data privacy protections? And Representative Bennett will just...
We started in appropriations.
Okay. So yes, that's a big question, and that's something that I have been curious about during my time in the legislature. Now, what's really interesting, so I've done a little bit of work or research through a national council of state legislatures on cybersecurity. And what's really interesting is you would hope that there would be like a standard. So for example, that we could look at to say, okay, here are the best practices, here is what your state should be doing. If you are a legislator exercising oversight, you need to check in that your state is doing these things. In reality, at this time, that's a little bit of a moving target. So that's the first thing that you should know, but I have looked at it, it's a moving target. So there's some question about that. I think that people are probably doing the best that they can. Funding is often an issue with some of this stuff because as you can imagine, for some people, this can seem a little bit abstract. So when agencies are coming and asking for money for stuff, it's weird. We are at the beginning of a transition for how we are managing a lot of our state data. There's a whole bunch of stuff with that, so I do want you to know that oversight is going on. But I do think this is a reasonable question to ask. I have asked it, and I'm continuing to follow up on it.
Anybody want to add anything? Representative Stave?
Yes, I don't know how I could give you an absolute answer to that, but I would say one of the things the state has done to make sure that we are at least covered is the paper ballots. The fact that we have the paper ballots and can verify that, I think, is extremely important. So I'm even more concerned about the flood of misinformation on social media and other places where people are getting information that is just absolutely incorrect.
Okay, now we are going to let folks wrap up, and if Representative Marquardt doesn't have anything she would like to add, we'll move to Representative Donahue.
Can I just add, though, that we have, back on the technology cybersecurity piece, we also have in the House we formed a new committee it's a subcommittee in the Appropriations Committee to address this overarching issue with all of our departments of government. So it's a topic, many of us are looking at it, it's not a partisan issue, and yeah, that's where we're at. If there's more that comes of that, or there's legislation that comes from that subcommittee, I'll pass that on to this, not only the league, but try to get it out there. Thank you.
Real quick, I don't think it's just Iowa that might have a security issue. It's across the nation. We have a security issue, and we need to somehow, I'm not a computer person, so we have to do better all across the nation. For my closing remarks, one, thank you very much for everybody being here, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for holding these forums. I remember sitting out there, and it was very informative, and I'm honored to be able to sit up here and represent you as well as everybody who's in my district. I will continue to fight for the people, as I said in the very beginning when I ran. This isn't about helping the fat cats make more money. I'm wanting to make sure that the people are getting what they need.
Well, thank you as always for hosting these events. They're always really good. Just a couple thoughts. First of all, next week is the first funnel. So there are some ideas that hopefully will go away next week, and of course there are other ideas that hopefully will survive. I do want to mention, I know a lot of people here were interested in the restoration of voting rights for people. That is an issue that survives the first funnel because it passed. The the House last year and is sitting in the Senate Judiciary Committee. So since it passed the House last year, it already survives the first funnel, and it gets affected by the second funnel. The same with the legislation that the House passed last year to protect pets from abuse. It also will continue to be eligible beyond the funnel.
737.
House File 737. Thank you, Representative State. The only other two things I would indicate, in the Senate, we're getting lots of commentary about confirmations of gubernatorial appointees. That's something that we do in the Senate. And so if you have thoughts on that, please continue to speak up on confirmations of gubernatorial appointees. And final thing is, we've had a lot of, I think all of us are on budget committees, and Senator Taylor talked about how we serve on the justice budget. A lot of work there addressing the fact that since the last prisoners released under Governor Culver, the rate of recidivism in Iowa has increased from 29% to 39%. So we really need to do more for community corrections. And there are other interesting proposals that I don't have time to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you. In my closing remarks, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for not only being here on this Saturday morning and all the times that I see all of you coming, but the personal interactions that you have, talking with us, speaking to us, not only here at the forum, but at the caucuses, other events. And I know the majority of you in here I've seen at the Capitol more than one time. Really do appreciate your engagement. You do make a difference. Please continue doing what you do. Thank you.
I want to thank everyone for coming. Keep contacting us, letting us know what's on your mind, and remember that funding is not set yet for schools, so keep sharing your stories on that.
Continuing on with the theme of thanking you for being here, I've got to give you another perspective. This really is one of the best in the state, and I know this because I've talked to our colleagues in the Quad Cities, Dubuque, Burlington, and I know that's not the whole state, but they have all said that there are forums and they just about the problems and how long it takes and the questions don't get answered and stuff. So this is a great format, and I think we do have one of the better ones. Hey, me and Chuck Grassley were on the same page last week. Keep the Iowa caucuses, right? And there's a, you know, I wanted to say something. I did bring up Jason Schultz. He's the chair of labor. I'm ranking member. We do butt heads, but I need to make this positive point. He and I are working together on one piece of legislation called non-compete legislation. Quick story, my hairstylist signed an agreement when she first hired on 20 years ago, and I've been with her 20 years, that if she ever to leave the place, she'd have to pay the company $1,000 a month for a year. And okay, you can enter into those agreements, fine, but it had no end date. So she was encumbered forever on that. She ended up paying $20,000. Anyway, so Jason Schultz and I are working on that, and I think we'll get it through the Senate in a bipartisan way. So there are some pieces of legislation that we can work with. I'd like to see more of that. Again, thanks for the forum, for you guys attending, and that's it. But you have it? Up to you.
I want this one.
Very good.
Okay. Along with the theme, everybody, thank you so much for coming out and being involved citizens. It's crucially important. Along those lines, I just want to encourage you to go and visit the state website, legis.iowa.gov. You can watch debates there. You can look at bills. You can see what lobbyists are lobbying on certain bills. You can look up committee members, emails, the debate calendar, so much information. So just go there, click around, take a tour, because it's something that can give you more information for participation. In the next month, I will personally be working on educating my peers in the state legislature to neutralize bills that are harmful and degrading to my fellow Iowans. I do also serve on the Appropriations Subcommittee on IT Infrastructure, so that's something that I suspect we're going to get very busy with. And also, I just want to give a shout out to the League of Women Voters and other organizations in the state for your work recognizing the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote. I also want to give a shout out to my peers in the State House, because we did something a little bit new with our resolution this year, and we made sure to recognize in our 19th Amendment resolution that 2020 is also the 55th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, because we know that even with the 19th Amendment, many women, women of color, were prevented from voting by Jim Crow laws. So we felt that it was important to recognize that there was additional work that needed to be done, and still needs to be done to guarantee all people the right to vote.
Thank you. The League would like to thank all of our legislators and you, our audience, for your participation in this morning's forum. I would encourage you to write to legislators who may not come as regularly to these forums as one would hope, and so perhaps a note to them that you really do look for them to be here. Clearly, there's large attendance here. Clearly, you have opinions on things, so it is important for them to know that. We also want to thank Heidi Kinder and her team here at Mercy Medical Center for their help with arrangements and for the use of this facility. I want to thank the sponsors again, Chains Interrupted, the Cedar Rapids Civil Rights Commission, Foundation 2, Indian Creek Nature Center. So please let's thank all of them.